welcome to session 31 of our tutorial series, Mandelbulb3D Epic Rendering. Now, in the previous half a dozen or so sessions, we were stepping through the process of setting up for a tiled render. Now, if we look at the screen here, we see here that what we managed to do is to render out 16 tiles, and those tiles are right here. All right. So it's done a really good job of rendering these tiles. So we're at a point now where we can actually stitch or merge these together. All right. So this is a turning point in our tutorial. This is the point at which we begin to reassemble this high resolution image to give us a full image that we can then we can adjust the quality. We could go in there and adjust the brightness, adjust some colors, modify the exposure. Okay, to kind of fine tune this thing. Now, the other thing we need to do too, because we realized that if you look at my screen, that we did render this out at a higher resolution than we actually need. So we're going to get to a point where we'll reduce that down to what the print vendor needs, either by cropping or downscaling. Okay, now I've talked about before, what you don't want to do is you don't want to upscale it. Good software will do a good job, all right, but it's better to discard pixels, downscale, than to have software that will try to add pixels or upscale. Okay, so that's why we overdid the resolution, but it gives us some bandwidth, some leeway in which we can prepare our final image to go out to the print vendor. So what we want to do is we want to merge these together. Technically, the appropriate term is merge these tiles together, not stitch. And the reason I say that is because let's just get the whiteboard up here. Merging implies that we're going to take multiple tiles and we're going to merge them together right there. Stitching implies that we're going to stitch or combine these tiles with the software trying to find matching pixels on both the first and the subsequent tiles. All right, this would be referred to as stitching. Whereas if we're simply abutting tiles together, this would be referred to as merging. Okay, so technically the appropriate term is we're going to merge these tiles together. Now, just in review. It's very important that you understand this concept. And I talked about this earlier in the tutorial series. If you go out and you acquire some panoramic stitching software, it's not going to work for you with these Mandelbulb produced tiles. The reason for that is that when you take a panoramic shot, you'll normally get some sort of an error. Okay, now that's called a parallax error. You don't have this parallax error with the Mandelbulb tiles. So that's one area that you don't have to worry about. And the other problem is, the other focus of panoramic software is that it will look for, it will try to do the stitching by looking at the matching pixels on either side of the tiles. Okay, and that will also be true in any direction. So the stitching is not something you need. You don't need stitching, and you don't need parallax error correction. So there's a number of software that will do panoramic stitching. Photoshop does it. GIMP does it. There's a software called Hugin, Hugin. That's open source. It's extremely robust. It's very, very powerful. All right. It's been around for a long time, but it does not do the kind of merging that we need. All right. Now, just in preparation for when we go about doing this merging, let me get a different color here just to kind of change it up a bit. Now, we know that we have 16 tiles that have been created, that have been merged by Mandelbulb. All right, I think that's probably very close to 16. Okay. Now, let's see, we need another row here. There's our 16 tiles that our Mandelbulb Big Render tool has created for us. Now, we know from having talked about this that the tiles have been made in this order. All right? So basically, let's get a different color here. So basically, I don't like that color. Let's go back to green. So basically, the tiles were made this way, and all right, and then this way, and then this way, like that. That's how the tiles were created. It's going to be important to realize this order here, because this is going to be the order in which these tiles are stitched. For instance here, this tile number 1, is going to have tile number 2 immediately to its right, and it's going to have tile number 5 that needs to be merged up to tile 1. Tile number 6 has to be merged up to tile number 2, as well as 5 and 6 merged together. So it's quite a process. It really is. All right. All right. So it's important to remember that there is no overlapping and there is no parallax error. And so you need a piece of software that does the that does the job of merging all of these 16 tiles or 100 tiles, whatever you wind up with, without relying upon stitching and without trying to correct for distortion that you'd get with a panoramic picture. So, all right, so that's why we need a merging piece of software that does this. Now, let's end this session by just introducing you to a software that's called ImageJ. It happens to be version 2. Now, I'm gonna end this session by you taking a look at this. All right, that location. This is where you get a hold of the ImageJ, which is in a larger application that's called Fiji. All right, and this is the downloads page right here. And what you're looking for is ImageJ. Windows 64-bit would be your best option. If you're on a really old system, I mean, if you're still working with, I don't know, maybe Windows Vista, maybe Millennium, you're probably stuck with Windows 32-bit. Go for the Windows 64-bit. All right. If you're on a Mac OS, well, that's great. You can get the ImageJ on a Mac OS, but your Mandelbulb does not run on Mac OS. Now, you can take and bring your tiles from your Windows machine into your Mac OS and merge them there. All right. But you're probably going to be looking for a Windows 64-bit download. All right, and what that's going to do, that does not install anything in the Windows environment. All right, what it does is it comes down as a zip package. You unzip it, and you put those into a particular file location somewhere on your machine, and it should not be in your Windows Program Files folder. Don't put it there. If you really want to know why, I'll explain it to you, but not in this tutorial series. So you're looking to get this thing downloaded and placed on your computer so that you can open it up and proceed with merging. All right, so let's continue this in the next session. We'll talk a little bit more about this ImageJ, and then we're going to move right into the actual merging process. All right, so I'll see you in the next session.